the notion of facilitating relationship between Arabs and Jews is nothing new. And my experience really not only in the Middle East, but working with Muslim and Jews in European context. When I was a senior advisor at CAICID, King Abdullah Center for Intercultural and Interreligious Dialogue, I've helped launched and also coordinated and directed a program that brought together the highest religious leadership in Europe of Muslim and Jewish. We had the chief rabbis from 11 countries, and also we had muftis, Muslim muftis, and high religious leaders from different parts of Europe. And we done that between 2015 all the way until 2021. It's always challenging really to convene and invest energy and time building cohesive relationship among the participants and then move with them to the next phase of exploring, okay, now we know each other, we have some level of trust, how can we contribute, how can we make something meaningful to both communities? I think come with the hope to change, yet they feel helpless in their capacity to affect and impact. That stage has to be done in a way that you can build a trust, but to build a trust with people that you think they are causing, or you think, you believe, you perceived they're causing your pain, your victimhood. And as we know from the 2 years in Gaza, such enormous degree and level of victimhood that felt among Muslims, Palestinian, Arabs in the US and also around the globe is and continue to be a great barrier for the capacity to reach out to the other side and explore the common humanities for the two sides. That's one of the major challenges I face. I have dealt with this for decades. The critique of the dialogue as being an act of pacification, the dialogue as an act that basically shifts the attention from the victim is valid. But my response to it always been that we should not look at dialogue as a magic wand that's going to solve the conflict that we have outside the dialogue room in a magic way and an instant way. We should put dialogue in its proper place and the framing. What dialogue does is help people to humanize each other, help people to develop deeper understanding of the other. And in many ways, I think also it helps people that deeply understand their own self, their own biases. And if a successful dialogue bring them to a level of realization that whatever I'm going to do, I should take into consideration the other sides as well. And that should not prevent them from doing things. The third response, I don't think it's a zero sum. If you go to dialogue, you cannot be active in human rights, in advocacy, in nonviolence resistance. In fact, I myself went through that as a young activist when I began working with dialogue, and 40 years later, I'm continue to operate in both areas. I operate in the dialogical circles, but also I'm active in the advocacy, human rights, solidarity movement in general. And I think the two should be linked. I think if you do advocate, and some people might disagree with me on this one, I think if we continue to do dialogue with no interest in solidarity, allianceship, or dialogue for the sake of talk, we are undermining the whole enterprise, if you want to say. And the same thing, if we continue to do solidarity work and action-oriented human rights advocacy, but with very little understanding of the other, very little grasping the human aspect of all people involved in the conflict, I think our capacity to influence the other through advocacy, through international solidarity work, will be limited. I think we can get far more in the field of nonviolence resistance and solidarity if we develop skills, dialogical skills, if we develop the capacity to reach out to the people that we're trying to change. If we are interested in dialogue focusing on our domestic concerns, for it to be widely accepted, widely endorsed, with community participation in the Muslim and the Jewish community, I think we have to travel in that path, a model where they can still express their solidarity with each other locally, at the same time have developed ways to reach out and express and take a stand and even have concrete actions. What can they do to support justice and peace in Israel-Palestine? The function of religious virtues, that is, and virtues in general, I think it's crucial. If the participants do not start and end situating and contextualizing from their own faith identity, then this is not an interfaith dialogue. It's a dialogue between two individuals who have an affiliation as Muslim or as Christian or Jews or Buddhists or Hindus. And unfortunately, there are many of those, they come in and they in many ways avoid talking about the theological aspects. They touch upon it mainly from a secular perspective. And I think that's because they're perceived to be trying to convert the other side. I used to see that in Sri Lanka and Philippines and the Arab region. People will say also, I am not expert in religion. So you don't need to be expert in religion to speak about faith, spirituality, about virtues. So in the beginning of the phase of dialogue, for Muslim and Jews, if we began that conversation earlier on, you have to rely on concept of a humanity, common humanity, the concept of a human life. In Islam and then in Judaism as well. Throughout the conversation, you have really to situate the concept in justice, in Hebrew tzedek, in Arabic adil. In Jewish theology, they talk about tikkun ulam, how can we fix the world. In Muslim theology or Muslim tradition, they talk about ihsan, about serving poor people, amal al-khair in that sense. These are virtues that every Muslim and every Jewish person hear them, speak about them in their own respective community. During the interaction, during the dialogue, many people discover that Judaism and Islam actually share more than Islam and Christianity and more than other religion together. They're very close. There are lots of not only rituals but also virtues and values that are common. And similarly, when you are in the Abrahamic circles, you also discover that the three Abrahamic tradition have many values, foundational values, whether it is mercy, forgiveness, reconciliation, justice, the urge to, or the appeal to help the poor, the appeal to deal with the orphans. These are all virtues within the three Abrahamic tradition as well. But love in the sense of, the way it is framed, I must be honest and say people tend to stay away from it, both Muslim and Jews, and we more can relate to it when we are in the spirituality phase, without necessarily connected to the theology of the established tradition, unless you're a Sufi that follow Rumi and Ibn Arabi, then you're not shy to embrace a human love and embrace love as a love for the Creator and love for the human, your human fellows. You embrace it as a virtue, you embrace it as a part of your life. But not everyone comes from that tradition, and I'm sure also in other tradition there are the mystical part of it and the spiritual will endorse love as part of their human interaction. the collective civic action should be, in many ways, organically linked with the process and the outcome of any civic dialogue and any interfaith dialogue, especially for Muslim, Jewish, or Abrahamic conversation here in the US. The implication of that, and why is that important? Because I think we did realize after 9/11 and also from other crises that we have here in the US, that the best way to protect yourself as a minority is to create alliances and solidarity with other people, other minority group, other people who are also marginalized, other people who feel threatened by the domination of one group that dominate the scene or call for, I would say, even white supremacy to be the primary culture in this country. So for me, the importance of interfaith dialogue now and dialogue in general is to what extent the outcome of this conversation of dialogue can connect to action, to solidarities with or against what's happening to refugees and immigrants, surveillance with the deportation, with what ICE have done in Minnesota, Minneapolis as well, and also the environment in this country of polarization. It requires us to connect beyond the dialogue group, beyond the dialogue room, with other communities who are feeling on daily basis threatened and their life are disrupted and threatened by the existing subculture, existing polarization, existing narrative and discourse that is built on exclusion and domination of one group over the other. And I think this is pulling our country backward compared to where we wanted to be 10 or 15 years ago. And I think whether it is Muslim-Jewish dialogue or a Christian or Abrahamic dialogue here, or the 5 major religions, Buddhism, Hinduism included, one major criteria for success, to what extent the outcome of the dialogue bring people to be active, to better understand that their faith and their safety and security in this country is connected to the safety and the security of everyone else, especially those who are being now targeted by the most recent policy of immigration.